found that 100% doesn't have to be thrown away, but 100% needs to be examined.
Welcome to the Better People Podcast.
I'm willing to look at anything that I've been taught or have taught.
Yeah.
And not everything is wrong, but some things are taught in a way where it makes it seem like this is the only absolute.
Yeah.
This is the absolute truth right here. This is the only way it's done. And really, there's more nuance to it. And I think that's what the biggest thing for me is. There are a lot of things that need to be corrected, because if we talk about particularly evangelical Christianity being rooted in white supremacy, all of that needs to be destroyed and then rebuilt. And I try to rebuild off of the faith that my ancestors carried. The faith that was meant to oppress, they turned into a faith of liberation. So I build off of them. But yeah, I began to look at things with more nuance. I began to reframe things, say them slightly differently, understand that there's a broader context, that we can go deeper or broader with this one idea, and be willing to go there. And even if you disagree with where someone lands, I'm not God. That's something they need to wrestle with the Lord.
Sure.
But I don't need to debate everybody. I don't need to defend God.
Yeah. One of the things that has been a motivator, for lack of better words, is fear.
I think fear is huge. I think that's a lot of Christians. And I think it's the fear because if this can be challenged, then what does that say about my whole faith? And a lot of people, they don't know what to do with if I can challenge this thing that I believed for 20 years, that I was taught for 20, 30 years of my life, and the implications of that teaching. If someone comes in, questions it, challenges it, and says this is actually inaccurate, it makes people question. You go down this rabbit hole of, well, what else?
Yeah, sure.
I stood so strongly on this, so what else can be wrong? And if there's more that's wrong, then what does that say about my faith? And that's the foundation of my life. And if I question my faith and I'm questioning the foundation, now I'm in a perpetual state of disorientation.
Yes.
That's scary.
Yeah. That is scary.
A lot of people, they shut those conversations down because they don't want to have to do the work required. Like I said, I'm not afraid of those things because I didn't come to faith because of those things. So we can question anything.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what I'm not going to question. I know what I heard.
Yeah.
I know what I experienced in that room 2 years later.
Yeah.
I know the demonic and the supernatural presence of God that I experienced. Right? So we can question whatever you want.
Right.
I'm not. It doesn't cause me to. It doesn't threaten my faith.
Yeah. I was listening to this guy who is no longer a Christian, and he was a Christian artist, very popular, especially in the evangelical world, African American, and he when he just kind of announced that he was no longer a Christian, he started to communicate, some of the things as to why. And so I think it's maybe been about 4 or 5 years since he stated he was no longer a Christian. And so he did a podcast just the other day, and he was sharing the different things that he's learned through this process. One of the things that he was telling people to do who were considering leaving was to be soft, to not move too fast in one direction or another, not to be quick to say what I'm not going to do or what I am going to do, but kind of to just be soft, listen and relax, because he said, it's like being in a relationship. He's like, once you've been in a relationship or married a certain amount of time, once you break up, it's difficult to jump into another committed relationship. He doesn't think it's healthy. You're not afraid to learn something, to listen, to engage. The not being afraid to question things makes it easier. There are so many people who want to participate in deconstruction, but their fear has them bound. And so I think to hear that you can be courageous in this and still have your faith, like being disoriented, it doesn't mean that you don't believe.
My first thought about even considering other perspectives, other teaching, is I still have to consider something that was passed on from someone else. Mm-hmm. And so my thinking was, how do I know then that that's true? Mm-hmm. No matter what you believe, either it came from you, mm-hmm, and you feel that this is the truth, or it was something that came from somewhere else, some other culture, even my own culture, but I'm still believing something that was passed down. Mm-hmm. So the question I would ask is, what makes me believe something else and not this? Mm-hmm. Is it because it's saying the things that I really want to hear? Mm-hmm. I'm just asking the question. Mm-hmm. The other part is when people talk about deconstructing and why they shouldn't fear it, is because you can't read the Bible from the Old Testament to the New Testament without deconstructing. Mm-hmm.
Expound a little bit on that.
Jesus, by nature of Jesus' teaching, it is a deconstruction of the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. Or reframing at the very least. Mm-hmm. That's why the Pharisees had a difficult time. You've heard it say, but I say, mm-hmm, yes, love your enemy, love your neighbor. But I say, he's about to introduce something that's very different.
Yeah.
Than what they were taught. Love your enemy. That would have been foreign to them.
Yeah.
And then he has to break that down, right? Mm-hmm. If you think about so it was good practice. I was taught when you try to pull or extract insights from the Old Testament, filter it through the New Testament to see what has modified, what has changed. So if I'm going to say, the scriptures in the Old Testament, spoke against tattoos.
Yeah.
Well, clearly we're a tattooed society.
Right.
And it's accepted. Well, what changed?
Yeah.
Is it simply the grace that we hear Jesus talk about in the New Testament and Paul write about and others? Right? So my point is just inherent to Scripture. Let me give you another example. The daughters of Zelophehad went to Moses and they advocated that their father's inheritance should not go to his brothers and his brother's kids. He should not lose his inheritance because he only had daughters. Mm-hmm. In other words, that's not right. Mm-hmm. Moses goes to the father. Moses goes to God. Moses comes back and offers and said, God, basically, this has changed. Mm-hmm. You can now get the inheritance of your father. Mm-hmm. That's a whole new teaching that goes against something that prior to that, it wasn't supposed to happen.
Sure.
So there had to be some bit of deconstructing a prior principle.
Yeah.
To come up with this new. If you read Scripture from Genesis to Revelation, you will see, and it is the Bible Scripture inherently deconstructs.
Yeah. Wow.
Or is deconstructed.
Wow. I hadn't even thought about it like that.
Afraid. Well, let me say this. We're afraid to think that because some people might think, well, the Bible contradicts itself.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah. Wow.
Maybe it does.
Wow.
Because certain contexts may contradict other contexts, and it requires something different, something new, something fresh. I mean, Jesus' interaction with women in the culture, you have to have deconstructed, to embody those relationships like he did and accept it.
Yeah. Wow, I think I love that. I love that perspective. I think it creates liberty. If your environment doesn't support that, then you're afraid to do that.
Yes,
And anything you're afraid to do, you naturally deem it wrong in order to just to come back to a place of security. And so
absolutely.
to think that this deconstruction is happening consistently through here, it really lays a foundation for liberation. You
Absolutely.
know, wow, I
So
love.
imagine if we taught that in scripture, I mean, in churches,
Mm,
rather than making deconstruction the boogeyman.
yeah,
We actually show how it's playing out in scripture.
yeah,
How
wow.
many times? How many times did was something
Oof.
literally condemned in the Old Testament, but approved in the New Testament?
Sure, sure. The other thing we can see that, I mean, there would be no Protestant movement, without deconstruction.
That's why the whole vilifying deconstruction is about power.
Mm-hmm.
It's about control.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't come out of the conservative evangelical space, then we have to label it something and create a narrative around
I'm not going to bring that in. I'm not going to bring it up. I'll just say that, you know, there's a bunch of suppression that is happening all in Christendom based on a limited perspective of God. Going back to what you referenced, the distance between his thoughts and ours. I said that to say that it's not just in the evangelical space, it's in a lot of other spaces as well,
it. Yeah, yeah.
because that perspective does not exist.
To your point, no matter where we fall on the spectrum, we all have been guilty of using scripture to support the things we agree with or we approve,
Yeah,
and then also using scripture to condemn the things that we don't.
sure, sure. I
Right?
know I did for years. I thought, when I look back at some of the things that I did, I just cringe. A lot of people try to encourage me despite that. They're like, "Well, you did so much good." But listen, I gotta live with this, okay? Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I remember you mentioning disorientation to me before, and we had a bit of a discussion about it, and I think that's a really important and powerful thing that people need to consider while they're going through navigating it. Because when you don't have a space where you can well, first, if you don't have someone saying to you, it's okay, like go, you got to choose, you got to jump off the ship.
Yeah.
And then I think too, when you don't have a group of people where you can kind of talk through these things and not be judged, and really kind of walk through whatever it is because we all know that our feelings change from experience to experience, from day to day, and so anyway, I said all that to say I really love that you said that, and I do think it's important for people to know it's okay. It's okay.
And there's no rules to this thing. So I would say that if someone said they're no longer a believer, I would be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sure, I would pray for them, but I'm not praying. I'm not trying to manipulate God. God, get them to come back. No, God, be with them, Lord.
Yeah.
Love on them, Lord. Right? Because I don't think we appreciate the whole journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it goes back to we want to master God. So the people who would judge that person, you're not doing it right, and you need to get saved because God could come back tomorrow. Oh, very well. God could also come back 500 years from now, 1,000 years, 2,000 years from now. Right? We've been in the last days actually since Acts.
Yeah.
Since Jesus ascended. Paul wrote as if Jesus was coming back in his time.
Mm-hmm.
That was the urgency.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the energy that Paul put in those words, we've taken those on in our own for 1,000, 2,000 years now. Jesus could come back any day now. Well, if you're secure in your faith, I'm not scared if Jesus came back today, tomorrow, or 500 years from now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't change anything for me.
Mm-hmm.
I still am called to be, to love, to serve, right? But the people who would judge are the ones who they try to master God, they try to master God's timing. They have this perfect plan. They have taken the space of God. So they don't know how to sit with someone, another human being, as they journey. That journey could last for most of his life.
Yeah. 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 I think it's more secure well, for me, I'll say for me, it was always more secure to be right, and then be able to point to see this is, and there was a great deal of security there. But when you are navigating in different ways, you don't have that. If you say, let me sit this down for a second here and really engage in this relationship, because the promise is he's going to remind me of this anyway. And it's really about the work that's happening in me and not the work that I'm trying to do for someone else. Love requires vulnerability. And what I was sitting in was safety. It was right. I was not vulnerable at all. So I'm really excited about what better people can do, because people are wrestling with things in the back of their mind that they would never say. And to hear that it's okay to journey through this thing, to hear that it's okay when the ground is shaking, to hear your experience when you talk about, you didn't come to faith through someone else, you came through your experience with God. But people need to know this is okay. And someone else may it's going to look a little different as you journey through this, and that's okay.
And
so,
one thing I'll say is with this deconstruction stuff, I'm encouraged because I've really deconstructed my ecclesiology, how I understand the church, or my theology around the church. And I've had many conversations with men and women who I respect in the faith. They are theologians like yourself. I just sat with one of my best friends, Chris Robbins. I sat with John Williams, both of them this week in the last couple of days.
Nice.
And we're on the same journey in terms of how we view church.
Yeah.
But guess what? All three of us love Jesus more than we have probably in the past.
Sure.
But there's a difference in how we approach or we understand the church, especially when you got wounds, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
Right. But that threatens people. If you walk away from attending church, then you must have walked away from Jesus. No, I love Jesus. And I believe the same as I did 5, 6, 7, 10, 15 years ago.
Can you share a little bit about what that looks like, not attending church?
So for me, because when I go into a church space, there's so many things that trigger me. There's so many things that I feel it in my body. So it's a physiological reaction. Heartbeat could increase. My body temperature could increase. Just physiological bodily responses. My nervous system's triggered, right? Because I'm remembering things.
Yeah.
And so I don't go into those spaces. I'm not saying I can't or I never will.
Yeah.
But that's not a part of my rhythm right now. I need a very organic church experience. So I take the verse that says, "Where 2 or 3 are gathered, there I am in the midst."
Okay.
I take that very seriously.
Okay.
So when I'm sitting down with coffee and there's 2 of us or 3 of us and we're talking, inevitably we encourage. It's life-giving. We affirm. We laugh. Right?
Yeah.
And if we're believing, and most of the time it's other believers, but God will come up somewhere organically in the conversation, even if it's briefly. But we're just 2 friends, 2 believers, 2 humans enjoying and encouraging, and it's always been life-giving.
Yeah.
And I have walked away light.
Yeah.
And to me, I know Jesus was in the midst.
Yeah.
That's church for me.
Yeah.
Right? I haven't lost community. Or when I go to someone's house, we have a thing we call Black Sabbath, where it's usually some African-American seminarians. We get together. Sometimes we get together once a month, and sometimes a couple of months might go by, but we'll get together just to be.
Yeah.
The church.
Yeah.
Right? We don't want to talk about politics. We don't want to talk about what's happening in schools and institutions and church.
Love that.
We're just loving on each other and laughing, karaoke, we potluck, we bring food, there have been tears, there have been joy. It's been life-giving. That's church. That's what I want and need in this season. And if God draws me back to that space, I'm in. But if God doesn't, I have not lost any intimacy with the Lord and with other believers.
I love that. I mean, I not only love it as I hear it, I love that for you. And I would love for people to enjoy each other and God in that way, that people could, because hearing it is understanding that it's okay. I know. And really giving the understanding of what it looks like.
Joy and peace have been at the center of my journey in this season. And I'm experiencing that more and more, right? So even as I deconstruct, and I know I have the freedom to do that, it hasn't led to more confusion. It's led to more joy and more peace.
Yes.
Because what I don't know, I can easily say, you know what, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
God may reveal something more definitive down the road, but right now, I don't know.
And that's freedom. That is so freeing. So what would you tell the guy who was saved years ago? What would you tell him now, being who you are now, understanding what you know? Is there anything that you would tell him, whether it be encouragement or warning or whatever?
Oh, the younger me?
Younger you.
Stay curious. Because that's how you learn. That's how you grow. Don't think that you can master God. I think that one of the biggest things is in the church, you get to a point, especially young people who get on fire, they know everything. I was there.
Yeah, I was definitely there. Yes.
You know everything.
Oh my God.
Everything is absolute.
Yeah.
You figured out God. We've mastered God. And I would say to him, I would say, one, stay curious and accept the grace that God has given you daily, that you're not going to get it all right all the time.
Yes.
And the reason why it's important that you accept the grace that God has offered, because you won't always get that grace from others.
Wow.
So remember the source of your grace. I said years ago, if I ever had a moral failing or even hint towards it, the very people who I have extended grace to, who have sat in my office, and I've never condemned anyone for sin. I've always been concerned about, where do you want to do moving forward? What do you want to do moving forward?
Yeah.
Right? You sharing with me is you basically confessing. So God is ready to cleanse and move forward. So I've never condemned, but I've always said, I won't get the same grace that I've given other people as a pastor.
Why? Oh, because you're a pastor.
As a pastor, well, I think most people won't get the same grace they give other people because we're dealing with humans.
Yeah.
And that's why I have to always remind myself the grace that God has given. God, thank you for your grace. Thank you for your mercy.
Yeah.
So those are two things. Stay curious and remember from where your grace comes.
Was there anything that you experienced in this time period as a Christian that you would change?
Anything that I've experienced that I wouldn't want to experience again?
That you wouldn't want to experience again, yeah.
I don't know if we got enough time.
Well, this is the thing, because I'm going to ask you right after that, and if you didn't, how would you be different now? So that's kind of two parts.
Here's what I would not have been rushing and feeling the pressure to get married. I would have been okay if it took me longer, if I was a single pastor much longer. I would not have rushed into getting married. I don't think I rushed into it necessarily, as much as I felt the pressure that
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be married.
Yeah.
So I overlooked some things. I would have been comfortable. And I think if I was in other spaces, it wouldn't have come up as much.
Mm. Other spaces outside of Christianity?
No, well, yeah, that too. But outside of that particular conservative space, I don't know if it would have come up as much.
Okay, got it. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I think I would have been more comfortable being single and not feeling like I have to be married soon. Because whether you realize it or not, you start to look for it. You start to like,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, because you're trying to create this perfect picture because we're inside a space that is, promoting perfection, 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 perfection. And so how would you be different if you hadn't done that?
Um, well, first of all, I'd be in a different place financially.
You said you'd be in
Because
it financially. Mm-hmm.
as a single man, I had a different plan and trajectory. There were things I wanted to do that required a level of discipline and sacrifice for a few years.
Okay.
And I calculated 6 figures. I wanted to get in some investments and stuff. But when you get married, you're sharing, like you have to now consider somebody else's goals and desires and discipline or lack thereof. You have to consider someone else now.
Yeah.
But if I had continued to be single in that season, I would have just continued in the rhythm that I had. Which would have put me in a different place, different space. I would have been able to do more. Even as a pastor planting a church, I wouldn't have had to depend on making a living through a salary there. It's just a lot. My life would look very different
Spiritually as well.
I don't know. I don't know if spiritually, because I do think that when you go through trials, one of the things they can do is strengthen your relationship. It's either going to weaken it or strengthen it.
Mm-hmm.
So the trials that I went through actually grew me. And I'm not one of those people that think that because there's some good that happened, that must be what God wanted for me.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I believe that the good that came out of it is God's sovereignty. God can make good out of anything if we're participating and willing to receive, if we're receptive to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if spiritually it would have changed a whole lot,
Mm-hmm.
other than some perspective. Like my prayer life changed going through that time, that season.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if anyone's listening, I'm divorced now, but I've been divorced for 10 years, almost 10 years now. My prayer life changed.
Mm-hmm.
My prayer life went from prayer is communicating with God, is talking to God. No, sometimes prayer is shut up and sit with God. Because I learned that I could just be with God
Mm-hmm.
and listen,
Mm-hmm.
because I was too wounded to even talk. And I learned that was okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the things I did learn was how to be with God. Because I was so busy pastoring and busy doing all these things and looking a certain way. And it wasn't fake. It was just the pressure of having to hit these marks. But when you're wounded, sometimes all you could do is sit
Mm-hmm.
or lay
Mm-hmm.
and be.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned how to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think when you mention that, I naturally go back to the thought of being disoriented. That when relationships shift or something's broken, it creates this thing, and being still is really important at that time too, because sometimes the ground is shaking because it needs to shake. But it's not trying to knock you down necessarily. But if you're standing, you just keep trying to stand up, keep trying to stand up. You're gonna fall down. And so, well, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. Looking forward to getting back together and sharing this. So he made it through without joking. I'm just shocked. I'm so shocked. You've been listening to the Better People podcast, where I believe that the fastest way to understanding is by listening.